In the Wild West world of podcasting, where podcasts are dominated by hosts who deliver a below-average product, and each unlistenable podcast is trying to be like the next, there is one podcast that is authentic and genuine and continues to stand tall in its originality. Based on a passion for his guests, their work, and his love of podcasting, Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast get amazing, diverse, unique guests found nowhere else. They include Hall of Fame athletes, Academy Award winners, Golden Globe winners, Super Bowl champions, Emmy winners, award-winning authors, award-winning film score composers, directors, trailblazers, pioneers, and inventors. The variety and quality are endless. There is something for everyone. Derek Thomas is the hero you deserve. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector. Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
Today's guest is named Leah Cairns. She's one of the best actors on the planet. I love her. Her work includes Interstellar, Battlestar Galactica, Supernatural, Travelers. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Leah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for that fantastic intro.
So I got to say, your life, so like when I break down, like when I do research, there's actors that are really good people on, on camera and off camera. They're, not like horrible people. But I feel like you've excelled like as a great human being, and you've also excelled as an actor too. Like I don't know, people will understand what I mean in about 45 minutes. But do you get where I'm coming from with that?
I'm not sure I do. What makes you say that?
Well, I'm going to say not many people travel the country, travel the world for 8 years. Not many people work in orphanages or build schools or help people with their lives. That's for starters. I mean, I just feel like you're a very giving and kind person. Not that other people are not, but I think you brought it to a level that when people actually talk about doing things, you actually went out and did something.
Well, I did. I was definitely a doer. That's absolutely correct. But I don't know that I should get that much kudos for the things that I did. If we want to break it down, a really reasonable way to travel when you don't have a lot of money is to volunteer. So all of those things were also helping me out along the way. It was something that I enjoyed, but it hardly, puts me into saint status.
No, I totally agree. But I also know that there are a lot of people that talk a big game that don't necessarily fulfill that big talk. And not that you talk a lot, but I just feel like your actions, you're right. Doing a good thing doesn't mean you should be nominated for sainthood, but it also does mean that you're a pretty good person. I mean, I'll say it, you don't have to.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So you grew up in British Columbia, and your story early on, you've told this story a lot, but it's kind of an interesting story for those who don't know it, right? So you love dance, especially jazz and tap, and if I'm wrong on any of this, please correct me.
Okay.
And at 16, you're hit by a drunk driver, and you spend a month in your life in the hospital with a broken back. You have rods, you're in a brace. Touch a little bit about that, Leah, because I believe that's got to be a very difficult time for you because you finally found your niche in jazz and tap, and then it's like, boom, life hits you, and take it from there.
As a kid, I was always a very optimistic person, and telling this story, it sounds kind of almost corny now because I really don't think this would be my response to that situation now. But as a 16-year-old kid, I almost never skipped a beat when it happened. I was just such a happy kid, and I went with the flow. And the first time I cried after the car accident was when they told me that I was going to lose a huge percentage of my flexibility, because all I cared about was dance. And then my dance teacher was the first person that came in after I got that news, and I actually broke down and we cried together. And then I just kind of sucked it up and got on with my life, and I decided that I was going to go back to dance. And then it turned out that I was really, really bad at it once I lost all that flexibility. So what happened was, my dance troupe made it to the North American Championships, which happened to be in Florida, for the very first time ever. And it was a huge feat for this little dance group from Kamloops, British Columbia. And I couldn't go, obviously, because my back was broken. So there was no way in my mind that I was going to be able to just sit at home while everybody else in my dance group was competing at this competition. So I found something else to do, and I ended up going on a youth environmental trip to Costa Rica. And it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, and it ended up opening this door of travel to this little girl from Kamloops, little tiny little town, Podunk town, in the interior of British Columbia. And I was just really grateful for that experience. So I could always see where the good things happened alongside with the bad things, and it just kind of never bothered me. But now as a 45-year-old woman who's in chronic pain all the time, it bothers me daily. But as a kid, I was pretty okay with it.
Yeah, I got to tell you, 45 is a great age because we are both 45, which is a good thing. And I have to say, when you're laying in that hospital, and I'm not trying to get negative, are you angry at all? Is it mentally, is it hell for you? And I know what you just said, but when you internalize it, are you like, God damn it, why me? Like, do you ever get that?
I didn't at the time. I mean, I could probably, I don't know, perhaps it was because I was on so much morphine. I don't know. I really can't wrap my brain around it. I was such a happy kid. I was a great patient. I had lots of friends coming to see me. I never had that moment of why me or being really upset with the driver. I felt bad for her. But then after a good decade of chronic pain, I definitely went through a why me phase, and then woke up one day when I realized, when I realized that I was actually lucky, because people kept telling me that actually when it first happened. Oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. And they meant, I was lucky that I didn't die. And I just kept thinking, what a funny thing to say to someone. How lucky you were that you were hit by a drunk driver. That's just an odd thing to say. And then I just let it go.
Yeah.
And then 10 years later, I was really like, I was not lucky. I was hit by a drunk driver, and that sucks. And then I had this moment of, holy smokes, I am so lucky. I could have died in that accident. I could have been paralyzed in that accident. And I just felt so lucky, because shitty things happen to people every single day.
Yeah.
I feel like if that's the worst that I'm going to get, I got out pretty lucky.
Yeah, that's well said. So it's like your reaction came a little bit as you were living your life, as life progressed, not so much up front. Is that kind of how I'm reading that?
Yeah. Up front, I was pretty okay with the whole thing. Things happen, and I carried on. And I think because perhaps I'm a person who just loves to experience things. I was just going with the experience of it.
Right.
As crazy as that sounds, I remember being really excited when they're like, ooh, you're going to have to spend the night in the hospital. I'm like, ooh, I've never been in a hospital before. I just kind of really went with it. And it wasn't until the grind of being in chronic pain for a good 10 years that I really started to fight some demons over the accident. It took a while.
Yeah, and when you branch out to when you start Costa Rica, and I'm going to get to that in a moment, and your troupe kind of continues their thing, is there any kind of, and I know it was your choice to go to Costa Rica, obviously, but is there ever a, like, and I know you said the reactions are later, and I get that, but is there any up front as far as, I wish I was there, or is it like, you know what, the situation is not that, and I can't look at it that way?
Yeah, the latter, definitely. I remember being in Costa Rica and just being in such awe of every experience that I got to have, and thinking, holy smokes, if I hadn't have been in the car accident, I'd never be doing this. And I really was seeing it through that lens at that time.
And I almost feel silly about to ask you this, because I think you've kind of already answered it when you said people said you were lucky. But was there ever a blessing from this? Is there anything that, outside of you coming out alive, is there anything you took away from it where it has stuck with you this many years later?
I think when you deal with something that young, you almost feel invincible, or I felt invincible. I came out of that okay. And I thought, if I can come out of a situation like that okay, I can handle anything. And it made me very brave. I was a very, very brave kid. I mean, most of that traveling that you were talking about, I did by myself. And I don't ever remember feeling fear. Ever.
Yeah.
Showing up by myself in a foreign country at nighttime with no plan and all my money strapped to my person in a money belt never occurred to me to be upset. And this is before internet. So it's not like I had access to what to do next at my fingertips. You just kind of had to go with the flow and make your way. And I did it.
Yeah, Leah, just hearing you speak 10 minutes into the interview, I can already tell your perspective and why you are where you are today. It's pretty clear. But let's talk about your traveling. Costa Rica, 36 countries, 8 years. I mean, that is amazing in itself.
So it wasn't 8 years consecutive.
Right.
I would go for a year. Your passport runs out. My ticket would run out. My access to Canadian healthcare would expired once, and I had to come and live in the country for 3 months so I could have access to a doctor so they could check on my back. So I was there and back and there and back. So over a 10-year period of time, I spent about 8 years traveling.
Wow. I mean, yeah, so a better way to say this would be, over the 8 years time span, you probably spent 90% of it traveling.
Yeah, it was over a 10-year time period.
Right,
so about 8 years out of 10. Yeah.
Right. So do you ever find yourself getting homesick in all this time? I mean, you don't seem like somebody that, I'm sure you think of home, and I thought I read where Mom accompanied you on a couple of your excursions.
Yeah. When I would get homesick, that's when I would call for reinforcement. So my sister traveled with me for a bit, and then we got my mom and dad added Kamloops, got them some backpacks, and they came and met up with us in Indonesia, and we all went backpacking around. And then my mom came to India with her friend, and I think she was there for a good month with me, 5 weeks, backpacking around, So I would get homesick, but I did have family and some friends that would come and meet up with me over the years. So,
Leah, was there ever a scenario where you're like, "What did I just get myself into?" I mean, you're out there like this, and it's impressive. Whether you came back after a year or not, it's still very impressive. Most of your time is away, but is there a scenario where you're like, "What did I do? What did I just do with myself?"
So many, so many. Yes, I had. This is such a crazy story, and I don't think I've ever told it, but I was in India in Kashmir, and there was a lot of political issues in Kashmir at that time. I was staying on a place called Dal Lake, and they really didn't advise tourists to go there at that time, but I went anyways. My best friend from home was with me as well. And we met on the bus, a couple of Italians and a guy from Belgium. And the guy from Belgium was actually doing a story on Kashmir for the BBC. And he took me with him to interview someone who was listed in my Lonely Planet book as, no, it wasn't a Lonely Planet made a book called The World's Most Dangerous Places. And the man that I helped this guy interview was listed as one of the most top 10 dangerous people, either in India or the world, probably in India.
Wow.
Yeah, and I didn't know that until a good year later, but I came to understand it very quickly when we went to interview him. The second we stepped off the bus and told people who we were there to see, by the time we arrived where that man was, he was at a cricket match with hundreds of people watching the match. They stopped the match. Everyone was waiting for us to arrive. There was already 2 seats for us to sit in, and we had to do the beginning part of the interview right there. And then when it started to get a little political and we started asking some tougher questions, we were taken into, and I swear this is a true story, we were taken into a telephone communications office, because back then if you wanted to call internationally, you go to the communications office and you'd get the phone, and I'd call my parents long distance, and the one that they had in that town was all glassed in, so you could see into it from 3 different sides. And so we all went into there, and there was people with machine guns all stationed around us watching the interview. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, my parents don't know this story. They don't hear this podcast. I was probably 23 or 24 at the time. 23, I think.
Wow.
Probably. Yeah. And for me, I just thought it was cool. I really felt invincible. And I probably got myself into quite a few hairy, scary situations, but I never remember feeling fear ever. It was always, whoa, that was a cool ride, or I can't believe I just did that.
So when do you decide, you know what, I've done my share of traveling, I've got it out of my blood, kind of, because I think you still travel on occasion whenever I'm sure whenever you can. But do you ever, when was the point where you were like, the best way I can compare it to it in movie analogies would be like at the end of Forrest Gump's run, right? He just says, I've had enough now. Like, when is your I had enough moment?
This is so funny you asked me that. My I had enough moment was when I fell in love with acting and realized I could only do it when I was in Vancouver.
Okay.
I discovered acting at an ashram in India, is where I took my first ever acting class. And then I came home, that trip was over, and I came home, and it never occurred to me that would be the last big trip I would ever take. But I came home and decided for fun to take some acting classes in Vancouver and fell madly in love with it and have never left the country for more than a few weeks since then.
I heard you say when somebody asked you, what did you take away from it? You said, in Asia, I learned the importance of family. You meet all kinds of people. What about another lesson you take away with you that you every day that you try to remember? Because in 8 years worth of experiences, or 10 years, sorry, I got to believe there's more than just, that is really important, but there's more than just that, right? Because it's part of who you are.
I think the biggest takeaway that I had from all those years of traveling was understanding that people, no matter where you live in the world, we are fundamentally the same. And a lot of the conflicts that happen in the world are miscommunication and not understanding different cultural norms. And living in a city like Vancouver, where there's a lot of people from all over the world, I see it all the time, where people are constantly misinterpreting what other people are doing, meaning what their intentions are. And it is so frustrating to see. And I think if you go traveling and you have the experience of, there are some languages that when they are translated directly into English, to the English ear, sound quite rude. The person who is translating from their native tongue into English is just doing a direct translation with the ability that they have, with the English ability that they have, and I can guarantee you they have zero intention of coming off as rude. They're just trying to communicate. But to the ear of someone who speaks English as a first language, it can sound really offensive.
Right.
And that is just one tiny example. And I've seen it over and over. And I when I'm traveling now, I tend to step into conversations and situations because it bothers me so much to see it. And I think that was the greatest lesson that I could learn, that you gotta put yourself into the other person's, not just their body, but look at the world through their lens.
Right.
And if you haven't been to their country or experienced their culture, that can be real hard to do. Or if you haven't been lost in a foreign country and know what that feels like, that can be a difficult thing to do, I suppose.
Leah, and it sounds so obvious what you're saying, right? But it's clearly not, because people around the world we still don't get it. We're still not incorporating people's differences. We still don't get it. And what you're saying is 100% true. And it sounds so simple, like, yeah, of course. But no, not of course, because people still don't welcome. When people see different, they see the tone tends to be negative, not accepting, right?
Yeah, exactly. And another example is when people say, well, when people come to my country, they need to learn our customs and do exactly as we do because they're in our country. And fundamentally, sure, eventually, I think it's really good for people. If you're going to live in a new country, it's really important to understand their cultural norms and to follow them. But as someone who was a foreigner in other people's countries, it can take a hot minute to figure out exactly what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And there are certain things that, for example, there are some countries where it's not only acceptable, but almost welcome to belch after a meal. It's a sign that you enjoyed it, and it's a, kudos to the chef.
Right.
I don't know that I could ever live in a country long enough to just feel okay with that, because I'm 45 years old and I've learned that's not okay.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's such a tiny little thing. But I can understand when people get offended by something that someone from another culture does. I can see where the other culture's coming from. Like, it takes a while. Like that, you gotta. Anyway, I know that that's a hot topic, but I really feel that from all that time spent traveling, that stuff just rolls off my back. I have a much lot more understanding about that.
No, that's great perspective and a great point. And you mentioned your family, and I'm not going to let this go by. I know your sister is a model, or was a model, I'm not sure, but I know mom is or was in the mental health field. Am I correct with that?
She's 72 years old and still doing it. Oh, 71. Sorry, Mom. She's 71 and she's still in that field. So that's 50 years.
That's amazing. I mean, come on. I mean, if we're going to get into people doing special things, okay, there's another one, okay? So now I've talked about you and your mother, and you're not going to talk me out of that stance, right? That's a tough field to be in for 5 years, never mind 50 years, right?
She loves it. She's wonderful at it. And she works with some really beautiful people.
Oh, that's very sweet. And so, I mean, to have that experience is amazing. I think did you meet your husband overseas as well?
I did not. We met working at a restaurant in Vancouver called Cactus Club. He was a bartender and I was a server, and I was saving up my money to go on my next big trip. And he wanted to, as part of his schooling, do a trip, a work experience abroad. And he was looking for a Spanish-speaking country, and he was taking Spanish classes when I met him. And then he met this girl who was always constantly talking about how great India was, and he kept getting job placements in India. He didn't get a single one for any Spanish-speaking countries, just India. So finally, he's like, you know what? I think I'm going to go. So he went to India 3 months before I did and got his work experience done. And then I went over and met up with him while I was there.
Oh, that's very sweet. And let me ask you. So when I ask other actors, right, when they talk about roles, many of them say many of my roles are based on somebody I know, right? So if there's a performance, somebody they know, they're channeling somebody. Have your travels helped you with roles? I mean, I know where you learned acting a little bit in India. I get that. But is there any other experience or something that you channel from your travels where it's like, that really helped me in the place I am today as an actor?
I don't think I have ever played a character that I haven't met.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Yes,
I mean, I
yes.
spent 8 years meeting people. And especially when you're traveling, those times when I was traveling by myself, I was constantly meeting people. When I say that I was traveling by myself, I mean, I flew on a plane by myself to another country, but you always meet up with other people and travel with other people constantly. And I really feel that I have never once played a character that I couldn't immediately go, oh, that's her. Or the character that I'm playing against in the scene. I'm like, oh, that's that guy. Yeah. Oh, I know that person. And I really feel that those years of traveling were the greatest acting teacher I could have had.
No, that's fantastic. And when I judge an actor, right, and I don't judge people, I'm just saying the ultimate sign that you've made it is one of two things. Do you either have one, an action figure, or two, a trading card? And you have a trading card, so I think you've officially made it at this point, Leah.
I think that my biggest I made it moment might have been during a movie called 88 Minutes that I filmed with Al Pacino. And I had 5 days, I believe, with Al. And there was the very last scene on my very last day working with him. The director, John Avnet, came up to me and said, Leah, if we have time at the end of the day, I would really love to do a shot of you and Al just dancing. Would that be okay? I started to laugh. I'm like, you want me to dance with Al Pacino? Yeah, that's fine, John. Sure. And we had enough time. And they put on some music and just unrehearsed, off the cuff, I kicked off my shoes and the two of us danced together, and we danced apart. We came together and did like some kind of, I don't even know, tangoing dance together. And at the end of it, Lily Sobieski was there, and she was tearing up. She said, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." And I couldn't understand why it was so great. I just know that in the moment, it was just Al and I dancing in a bar. And when it was over, I threw my hands up in the air and I said, "That's it. It's never getting better than this for me. I'm done. I quit. I finished acting." I finished acting and I walked out.
And I had an actor on a while ago that said John Avnet was his favorite director he's ever worked for.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
He's a lot of fun.
So I wanted to ask you about I was going to ask you before I let you go, but I have a few more questions here. But like 88 minutes. So there's a scene in that movie, right, where you're brushing your teeth. I'll say it that way, right? Mm-hmm. Do they ever, when you take apart, or let's just say John in this case, does John say, "Hey, this is what you have to do for this role"? Like, how much can they expect of an actor, right? They can't just say, "Hey, Leah, guess what? This is what you're doing today." Like, do they have to run it by you? Is there like a union thing they have to do? How do they run? How does that work?
That one worked with, I was asked to attend a meeting with John and a casting director by the name of Maureen. And the casting director said, "John Avnet would like to meet with you. He's got this idea for a role. He is looking for a dancer. And he doesn't know exactly what he wants, but he wants to talk to someone who's a dancer and an actor. And you came to mind. Would you come to this meeting?" I said, "Of course I would." So John sat me down and he told me, he just said, the opening shot of this movie, I want it to be something where people don't exactly know what's going on. And once they do realize what's going on, it's very different from what they thought it was. And I want it to portray to the audience that this woman is a dancer. And what are your thoughts? What do you think? What can dancers do? And so I was going through some different things, different stretches I could do. And then I said, I can actually, and I can stand this way. And I think it was Maureen Webb, the casting director, that came up with the idea of the vibrating toothbrush. And I said, "Well, I can do that while I brush my teeth." And John's eyes about bugged out of his head. Because for those of you who haven't seen the scene, I'm stark naked with it looks like I'm stark naked. I was not, but it looks like it. And then I'm got my leg up in the air with one hand and I'm brushing my teeth with the other. And it did it's a great scene, not because you're naked or appear to be naked, but it's a great scene because of the moment of where the movie is at that time and the look on Al Pacino's, like, it's a great scene. It's not a great scene because you're you appear. It's just a great scene. It's a fun scene. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, of course.
And that was the first time I'd ever had a director ask for my input on a scene that hadn't yet been created. So it was a pretty big moment for me.
And speaking of really cool, I have a feeling that you're really good with people at Comic-Cons. I've seen the way you interact with people, not firsthand, but from reading things. But you also have I heard this story today, and if you were in front of me, I might have just given you a big hug. You have just a sweet story that you tell about Peter Mayhew and your first time at a Comic-Con. Do you remember? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Peter Mayhew, yes. Oh, bless his heart. The convention that I did when I met Peter, I had only done European conventions, which are quite different from American ones. So I didn't realize how different it was going to be until I went to it. So it was a signing convention, which means you just sit at a table and you sign and you sign. And it was the first time I'd been to a convention where there was actors from all different shows. All the European ones I'd done had been actors just from Battlestar Galactica. So I looked around the room and realized that Peter Mayhew, Chewbacca, was coming. And I literally freaked out. And he was a day late coming because his bags didn't arrive. And I remember stupidly saying, "Well, who cares if his bags didn't arrive? Why doesn't he just go and get some other clothes? Why is he missing the convention?" And then someone's like, "It's not that easy for him to just go to Walmart and buy some clothes, Leah. He's kind of a tall guy." So anyways, he finally showed up. And I didn't know about this unwritten rule with actors that if you're an actor at a convention and you fan out, which we often do with each other's shows, you just go in the green room and exchange photos, autographs, whatever. Yep. I didn't know that. So I saw his table and I went and I got my money and I lined up. And I was probably, I don't know how far back I was. It felt like I was really far back, maybe 20 people. And as I'm getting closer and closer and closer to him, my heart rate started going up. I started getting nervous. And I'm thinking, what am I going to say to him? He's just going to be looking at me and I'm going to, what if I say something dumb? And what if I start stuttering? I mean, it's Chewbacca, for God's sake. And I just freaked out and I left. I couldn't do it. I didn't have the nerves to go and ask him for his autograph. And I was so grateful that I had that experience, because when I had been at these European conventions, there were some people that would come up to my table and they would be visibly nervous. They'd be shaky or a little sweaty or not getting their words out very well. And I just kept thinking, why? It's just me. What's the big deal? And I didn't get how intimidating it was being on the other side of the table. And I'm so glad that I had that experience, because now I just think anyone who comes up to ask for my autograph at a con is the bravest damn person that exists. I mean, I'm just so proud of them for doing that, because I couldn't do it. So when I do see someone who's a little bit nervous to come to the table, because I've been through that now, I do everything in my power to make it comfortable and make it okay and just really give everyone a great experience. I love conventions with my whole heart.
Yeah, and that's totally who you are. Like, and it's not an act. That is who you are.
Not,
you know, and when you got like, I think the funniest part of that story is like you're getting ready to pay for his like picture or autograph in line like everybody else, and they're like, wait a second, you know, it is an unwritten rule, and yeah, that's an awesome story. And one person I have to ask you about, because we talked about John Avenett a little bit, is Christopher Nolan. And let me tell you something. Like, I just shame on anybody that's ever interviewed you and does not bring up Interstellar. And I know your role, you had like 2 or 3 minutes on screen, which is huge for that movie, right? But like anybody who's not bringing that role up to you, like I get furious when I was doing research about your life and no one's talking Interstellar. Like, I'm ready to pull my hair.
Nobody talks about it. I know. I hear you. They don't bring it up.
And off air, I was people ask you about Battlestar Galactica, which I'm going to end with, and it's a phenomenal show. You were so good in it. But no one talks about Interstellar. I'm sorry to cut you off. I got really revved up for a second.
No, sure. Hey, it's all good. It boggles my mind too. That was such an incredible movie with such incredible actors. I don't know how it goes under the radar, but somehow it slips under. So
no, it's a big scene for a couple reasons. One, it's what Anne Hathaway says before your scene when she's talking about love, and then they go to your scene and you're, I don't know if they're there or not, but Casey Affleck, Jessica Chastain, talk about the experience working with those actors and what that meant to you.
Well, Interstellar, funnily enough, was my very first job that I booked after I had retired. I've quit acting twice. Wow. In my very short career. I mean, I started acting very late. I think I took my first acting class at that ashram when I was, 27 maybe. And I quit once and then got dragged back in. And then I quit again when I was pregnant with twins.
Right.
I thought, I'm done. I'm raising my children. That's it. I'm not going back. And then an opportunity came up where I could actually understand how I could actually have these children and go to auditions and not lose my mind. So I took that opportunity and I started auditioning. And holy smokes, I was not expecting that my very first job back would be with Chris Nolan and a movie that's essentially 90% Oscar winners.
Yes.
I was like, why couldn't I couldn't just do a day on season 10 on Supernatural? No, ease me back in. Come on, guys. So it was quite wild, and it was very before I actually got to work with him, everything leading up to it was extremely stressful because Chris likes to be very secretive about his projects, and I understand why he does that. And I think it's fantastic. People don't know anything about his movies until they walk into the theater to go and watch them. So it's all for the audience, and I kudos to him. But holy crap, when you're trying to act under those circumstances, it's crazy town. he never told me what the movie was about. He wouldn't let me read the script before I walked on stage or walked onto the set. He sent me the scenes that I was in to my house on red paper, because you can't, in case you can't photocopy red paper or something, or upload red paper. There's something to do with red paper that it would keep it secretive. So he sent these sides to my house, but it didn't say which character I was. So I'm reading them, and I have no idea what any of the scenes are about. I don't know what it means. I don't know what the circumstances are. I don't know where it is. I don't know when it is. I know nothing, and I don't know who I am. So I just memorized everybody's lines. Wow. And then they flew me out to Calgary where we were shooting. And I thought, right, so when I arrive, I'm arriving the night before. The night before you shoot something, they send out a sheet, and it tells you all the people that are in your scene and what your character they play. So I found out the night before which character I was supposed to play. Okay, great. So I know that. And then I find out who's in the scene with me. Holy crap. Jessica Chastain, Casey Affleck, Topher Grace. And I said, okay, you know what? I will hunt those people down at the hotel we're staying at and ask them what this movie is about. Well, I'm talking to the driver, and I said, so do you know which rooms these guys are staying in? Because I really need to speak with one of them. And he starts laughing. He said, oh, none of the actors are staying in the same hotel. Everybody's all split up. And I'm thinking, oh, of course they are. Okay, great. So I'm not going to talk to them the night before. I'm like, okay, well, on the day, I am in the very last of the day. So I will have the whole day to go and find someone and get them to explain to me what this movie is about. Well, 10 o'clock in the morning, I get this call. I'm in the shower, and my phone is going off the hook in the hotel room. Like, are you in the lobby? Are you in the lobby? I said, in the lobby. Why am I supposed to? They said, oh, he's gone really fast today. I said, I'm in the last scene of the day. I know. Get downstairs. We're late. So I jumped in the car, and they were walking us the whole drive. They kept calling, and is she here? How long is it till she's here? How long till she's here? So I wasn't even in hair and makeup or my costume when I went on to the set to do the blocking, which means, a little rehearsal of the scene. So I didn't have time to talk to anybody, not the hair person, not the makeup person, nobody. And I asked the person driving me, do you know what this movie is about? And they said, no, we have no idea. I said, okay, great. So I show up on set and, casually walk by John Lithgow and Michael Caine's over there. And, oh, look, there's Matthew McConaughey. And then go in and there's Jessica and there's Topher and Casey. And right away, Chris comes up to me and starts pumping my hand. Hi, Leah. Thanks so much for coming. Great to have you here. How are you feeling? Are you okay? And I'm like, no, I am not okay. I'm freaking out. And he just looked at me like I was a lunatic. And I said, I have no idea what this movie's about or what the scene is about. And he just started to laugh. He said, oh, Leah, yeah, that happens when people work with me. He said, and he told me a story about another actor that this happened to on one of his Batman movies. And we all had they were all laughing. I was dying inside. And then he sat me down and he took all the time in the world to explain what was happening and explain the movie and explain the scene. And we just talked a couple of days trying the scene every which way. It was like, Jessica kept saying it was like shooting the indie with a massive budget. He was so free with the way that we acted and the lines that we said. We did so much improv and tried so much stuff. It was one of the most glorious acting experiences I've ever had. So it was almost worth all the stress in the beginning.
Now we see what he's like on the outside, right? So as you get that chance to meet with him and he's going through the whole movie, do you see why he's special? Does that resonate? Like, I know he's special because I see what he produces, right? So you see the man that we don't see. But do you see as a professional, as an actor, as somebody who knows what she's doing? Do you see like, wow, I get it now. I get why this guy is special.
Well, personally, I think he's a genius.
Yeah, of course, yes.
And I think that his movies are special because they are all him. He puts together these incredible teams that know him and what he wants inside out and upside down. And there's no distraction. He doesn't allow cell phones of any kind on set. He doesn't like to have anything that's not involved with the movie in his eyesight, in his sight of vision. So even the transport trucks bringing actors back and forth, there's a specific times when they're allowed to come in because he is 100% immersed constantly in the movie. And when you're acting with him, he knows what he wants, but he gets these teams together that can give him what he wants. And then he gives everyone free rein. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well.
Yes, I get it.
So he takes a lot of time to put together these teams, and there's a reason he uses the same actors all the time, because he knows that they understand his language and that they understand what he wants, and then he lets them just go because he trusts everybody. Yeah, and it's just like magic on set. Does that make sense?
It 100% does. It's clearly it's clearly why he uses Michael Caine. I mean, it absolutely makes sense to me. And I'm not an actor, so I mean, yeah, he likes a team of people around him that understand his philosophy, how he does things. In other words, they connect with him without him having to really always explain himself. They kind of feel where he's coming from without him having to go over an explanation every single time. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah.
And he's like the Daniel Day-Lewis of directing, right? He doesn't do directing. Yes. Yeah, right. So if he doesn't do many movies, so you know when he does one, it's going to be special, which is shocking to me because people don't ask you what Interstellar, and like I said, it drives me bananas. But I have to say, and I have to ask you this. I think you said this. My record right now is not so good with things that you've said, but I thought you said you didn't like sci-fi at first. Like, it was tough for you, the language and the terminology. It was frustrating for you, right? Is that true?
Yeah. Well, when I first started auditioning for sci-fi shows, because if you don't watch them, and all of a sudden whenever you're given a part of a script, it's called sides. I've said sides a few times and I realize people may not know what I'm talking about. So you get given these sides before an audition and it's just a scene or two. And if you haven't been watching all the episodes of the show, you have no idea what they're talking about. Well, in a drama, you can figure it out pretty quick. But in a sci-fi show, I mean, even in Battlestar, FTL drives and the DRADIS. I showed up on set. I had no idea what either of those things meant. I had to ask another actor. I'm like, what's a Cylon? What's a Cylon? If you haven't been watching the show, how would you know what a Cylon is? So I found it really difficult in the beginning to wrap my mind quickly around the genre. And I clearly wasn't doing a good job of it because I was auditioning for sci-fi shows constantly because we do a lot of them in Vancouver, and I was failing miserably. And I had this moment of, I hate auditioning for sci-fi. I'm not doing it anymore, and told my agent that I didn't want to audition for any more sci-fi. And thank God the next words out of her mouth were, okay, fine, I get that, but you do have one for Battlestar Galactica tomorrow, and you need to go. Thank goodness, because had I really given it up before I got Battlestar, I probably wouldn't be an actor today, really.
Right.
So I think a lot of good stuff came to me because of Battlestar.
See, that's where I think your travels would help you, right? Because it's almost like learning. It's almost like being bilingual, right? These words are all like made up, and you don't know what the. I don't know some of these words, and I'm a big fan of Battlestar Galactica, so it's having to learn like new terminology, which I get your frustration. It's absolutely frustrating.
Yeah, I think, now with technology, it is so much easier because all this stuff, anytime there's something I don't understand, I Google it. You can see YouTube clips. Everything's on Netflix. You can watch a few episodes of a show. But back then, you couldn't do that as easily as you can now. So it was a little bit, I was really going in blind a lot, which is never a good feeling when you're an actor going into an audition. You should never be doing that.
You know what's so weird, Leah, before I ask you one more question about Battlestar, is that some of the clothes that you've used in shows is for sale on eBay. Like, How strange is that? And you're not the only one. Like, I've seen clothes from, like, the Shawshank Redemption, and I think that's just so weird. I mean, not weird in a bad way. I mean, I'm somebody who collects, autographs and photos. And I mean, I'm a geek as well. I get it. But I just think it's kind of like, I don't even know how that process would even take place.
Of our stuff being on eBay? Yeah,
Yep.
Well, they auction a lot of the stuff off, and I stupidly didn't take my flight suit from Battlestar Galactica, which I constantly kick myself. I don't know if I've told this story. I may have publicly told this story. I'm not sure. But I think I've tried to keep this secret for so long, but it's not secret anymore. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis during the last season of Battlestar. I became very, very sick. And the MS that I have, thankfully, it seems to be the kind where you only have one bad episode, because I've never been sick again since I got better. But I was very, very ill for about 5 months, maybe. I had double vision so bad. I was basically blind. I was paralyzed on my right side of my body. I had to, I had no use of my right hand for months. And so at that time I was working on Battlestar Galactica and Sanctuary, and I had a movie that I was supposed to shoot with Kevin Sorbo in Buenos Aires. And I had to bail on all those jobs. And Battlestar was so fantastic. They said, well, we are going to give you as long as you need. We're going to throw a racetrack in the brig, write her out. And if you can come back for the very last episode, if you're well enough, we have an idea for racetrack. And I had to be, by the end of the day, I had to be carried on and off the rafter. I was so weak. Wow. And heat made it worse. Yes. So they very kindly got a big ice bucket for my feet to keep me cool, and they hacked off the legs of my flight suit. Oh, so they had made them basically into shorts. I had this kind of like short romper thing. And at the end of the day, they said, well, do you want your flight suit? And I looked at that thing and thought, why would I want a legless flight suit? And I don't want that. And I said, no, keep it. And I went home. And years later, I was at a convention in Seattle, and this lovely gentleman came by. He was a doctor at the Children's Hospital, and he said, Leah, I own your flight suit. And I was thinking, no, you don't, because mine has no legs on it. And I didn't know what to say to him. I'm like, Leah, you're an actor. He spent a lot of money, I bet, buying what he thought was your flight suit. And just smile and fake it. Just fake it. And he said, I have it with me. I already knew that he thought he had it there. He had put a display of all the costumes that he owned at the convention. And someone had told me, oh, they have Racetrack's flight suit. And so I had already been prompted about it. And I thought, oh, that's such bullshit. There's no way that my flight suit's actually here. And he said, would you like to come and see it? And my heart just sunk. I thought, oh, God, don't let him know that it's not your suit. And so I agreed to go and look at the suit. And wouldn't you know, I took a look at it, and they had sewn the legs back on. There was seams at the knees on both sides. And I burst. I'm dead serious. And I burst into tears. I started to cry. It was such a wonderful moment being reunited with my suit, because I only ever had one. I wore that suit. That's all I wore for all the years I was on that show, that one suit. And it was really, truly my suit. And it was such a really special thing. And so him being a doctor, I said, listen, do you want to know why those seams are there? He goes, I could never figure out why they would have seams there. That just seems so bizarre. And I said, oh, I've got a good story for you. And he's like, oh, mystery solved. But I've heard that he has sold it, and it belongs to someone else now.
Oh my God! So how are you? Before I ask you one final question, how are you doing with MS? How's life been for you? Have you been managing it? Has it been manageable for you?
Yeah, I only ever got sick the one time. Yeah. I have been perfectly fine ever since. It's the weirdest thing, and apparently that's a thing. Apparently there's a big group, or a small group, of MS sufferers who just have one episode, single episodic. single episode, something. Yeah. So I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
And for those who that don't know, Racetrack is an absolute icon from Battlestar Galactica. She's one of the characters that people love. Just to put it in a nutshell, you have to promise me before I let you go, there's not going to be a third time where you say, you know what, I'm done with acting. Please, just not a third time. You're staying, right?
Well, I don't know.
No.
That's always a hard thing to say. I mean, I haven't worked in a while. And I think that every actor goes through, whenever we don't work for a while, everyone gets pretty panicky and wonders if this is it. So hopefully I book something again soon that I really, really like. But who knows? Never say never. You got to hang up your shoes at some point. I don't know.
No,
we'll
you're not, because I have a lot of directors that listen to the podcast, and I will not let them cast another person without looking at you, because I just think your body. Hey, you quit the second time, and who came calling? Right, you're going to quit again, and since Spielberg's going to knock on your door.
That is true. And the fact that Chris Nolan picked me out of everybody that auditioned for that part, it keeps me going on a regular basis. I really do have to admit. I think they only cast 2 Canadians on that whole movie. And I think we were one of a tiny handful of people that hadn't been nominated or won an Oscar. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, and I love your work, and you know how I feel about you as a human being. Her name is Leah Cairns. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. You let me harass you into coming on to this show. You were so kind to give me an hour of your time. I'm so fortunate to have you. Thank you so much, Leah.
Oh, it was really my pleasure.
We used to look up in the sky and wonder at our place in the stars. Now we just look down and worry about our place in the dirt.
Go for main engine start, T-minus 10.
We must confront the reality that nothing in our solar system can help us.
9.
I've got kids, Professor. How long would I be gone?
8.
I'm asking you to trust me.
7.
Murph, you have to talk to me, Murph.
6.
I need to fix this before I go.
You have no idea when you're coming back.
5. Main engine start.
Couldn't you have told her you were going to save the world?
No.
4.
When you become a parent,
3.
one thing becomes really clear.
2.
And that's that you want to make sure your children feel safe.
1.
I'm coming back.
When?
I love you forever.
Potentially habitable worlds right within our reach.
Could save us from extinction.
Here we go.
You can't just think about your family. Now you have to think bigger than that.
I am thinking about my family and millions of other families.
Maybe we've spent too long trying to figure all this out with theory. Love is the one thing that transcends time and space.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
All right, I make it.
Yes, you are. We'll find a way. We always have.